Welcome to MMA on the Rocks. My name is Bill Welker. You are listening to episode 335 of the podcast. Unless you're joining me live on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. If you want to catch the show live, make sure to subscribe on one or all of those platforms and turn on your notifications so you know when the show is live, like right now. Today is Tuesday, October the 24th. So normally I would record on Sunday, especially on a weekend like this when the fight card was on early in the day, but I can explain. My family was in town. My mom and dad came to visit, and we were doing some stuff with them. I was picking them up at the airport when the fight card started. So I was sitting in the airport cell phone lot in Tampa, and I was watching the fights on my phone as I was waiting to pick them up. So I saw like most of the prelims. I missed a lot of them beginning of the main card, and then I got back home in time for the Usman Chimaev fight. I actually started watching it from the third round though, so I may have a different perspective than some people on that. Then on Sunday, to celebrate my wife's birthday, my mom and dad took our daughter for the day. They took her to the aquarium and stuff like that, and the wife and I decided to have a grown-up day, and we took our bikes to a bike trail here in Pinellas County, Florida, called the Pinellas Trail, which runs, I don't know how many miles that thing is, 37 miles or something. We started somewhere in the middle of it, and there's a bunch of breweries along the bike trail. So the idea was drink a beer, burn a beer. So we started in Dunedin, Florida, at one of our favorite breweries, Seventh Son. They make some really fantastic beer. For those of you who don't know, the Tampa Bay area is like a hotbed for craft beer for whatever reason. I don't know why there are so many great breweries here, but it's definitely a weakness for me, um, because I try to avoid beer because it's not great for the waistline, and I don't want to buy bigger pants, so I don't drink as much beer. I try to stick to straight liquor. But we did the brewery tour. So we started at Seventh Son, and then we rode north to a brewery called Devine, and then continued on to Tarpon Springs, Florida. It was about 11 miles, so 22 miles round trip. And we hit two breweries in Tarpon Springs as well. Probably pedaled back a little bit slower on the way home, but we made it, and it took us about 5 hours. Nice leisurely bike ride, and stopping for some beers along the way and some food, and it was a really nice day. And then last night was my wife's actual birthday, so a very happy birthday to her once again. So we went out to dinner with her parents in Tampa, and we went to a Brazilian steakhouse. For those of you who aren't familiar with this type of establishment, what they do is they give you a coin on your table, and you can flip it to red or green. And if it's on green, they will continue to come out with a parade of grilled meats. So steaks, lamb, sausage, chicken, fish. And as long as your coin is on green, they will continue to pile food in front of you. So, we indulged a little bit for the wife's birthday. And by the time I got home, I was in no condition to be doing a podcast or talking. I just wanted to get in some sweatpants and relax with the family. So that's what we did. So here we are on Tuesday to talk about UFC 294. What an exciting card. And right off the bat, Mark Fellows says, "Hi, Matt Temple. On behalf of Australia, please don't tip our fighters again. Thanks." I believe he meant please don't pick our fighters again. So for those of you who have been tuning into the weekly segment on Thursdays, which is only available on YouTube once again. So if you want to catch the Fight Picks episodes, make sure you subscribe on YouTube and turn on your notifications. Those shows have not been live yet, but they will be soon. So I bring my buddy Matt Temple on the show, and he makes fight picks. He usually gives a parlay every week, and he is currently 0 for 3. So, he's starting to develop a bit of like the Chael Sonnen curse, where whoever he picks, if that's your favorite fighter, you should be concerned. So that's what Mark is talking about here. Because Matt did pick Volkanovski as part of his parlay. And obviously that did not work out. So every Thursday, I have Matt on the show. He gives me some fight picks, and I critique him. This past week, we actually made a bet, which I'm not going to be able to honor this week because there's not going to be a picks episode this Thursday since there's no UFC fights this weekend. So it's going to have to wait till next week. But I told him that I thought Kamaru Usman was going to pull off the upset against Khamzat Chimaev on short notice. And Matt picked Khamzat. So actually, he did get one fighter right in his parlay. So now I have to do a shot of poblano liqueur. So I guess it's like a spicy pepper liqueur, which is probably meant to be mixed into a margarita or something like that. But I'm going to have to drink it straight because I bet on Kamaru Usman. And given the performance, I don't think I was far off. I think a lot of people thought he was going to get blown out of the water, and it was a very competitive fight. Before we get to that, let's talk about the main event. So Islam Makhachev defends his lightweight championship against Alexander Volkanovski. Now, obviously, we know that Volkanovski took this fight on 10, 11 days notice, whatever it was. He was coming off of a hand surgery, just had a baby, all these things. Wasn't ready for a title fight, but said yes anyway. When the UFC called, he responded and said yes. It didn't seem like there was even much negotiation. This is the fight that he wanted. This is the fight he's been asking for. Now, going into this, a lot of people were saying things like Volkanovski had nothing to lose, which I think is unfair because now that we've seen the result, so he got head kicked in the first round, got knocked out by Makhachev. Now he's lost the opportunity to get this fight back is what he's lost. As long as Makhachev is the champion at 155 pounds, the UFC is not going to want to see Volkanovski move up and fight him for a third time, at least not anytime soon. And now he's got to go back to 145 pounds, a division that he's essentially cleaned out, right? I mean, I can pull up the rankings, but he's beaten a fair amount of these contenders. So obviously, Ilia Topuria is next in line. And, it's unfortunate for Volkanovski. All right, so the top of the division here, Max Holloway, number 1. Obviously, he's beaten him 3 times. Yair Rodriguez beat him. Brian Ortega beat him. Arnold Allen didn't fight him yet, but, he's not in the conversation just yet. Ilia Topuria beat him. So he's beaten everybody in the top 5. So it's like, how far are we going to go down giving guys title shots? And you have to wonder if it's going to affect his mindset. Let's see. Mark says, should Volk versus Topuria go ahead in January, or should Holloway step in for an interim title? If I were someone in Volkanovski's camp, if I were his coach, someone close to him, I would not let him fight Ilia Topuria in January. I know right after the fight, he said he was fine, but that's easy to say. Every one of us that's ever done hard sparring or fought before, we've gotten our bell rung and said we've been fine when that's not the case. And sometimes you do feel fine immediately after, and then sometimes a few hours later the room starts spinning, or a few days later. There's no way to tell how a concussion like that is going to affect someone. So he needs to take probably 60 days off from hard training. So we're at the end of October now. So that puts him into December. Now he's not going to do that. I mean, I would hope he's going to take at least 30 days off. And then that would put him right in the vicinity for maybe a 6-week camp. But I just don't think it's a good idea for him to take that fight. I know he's the type of guy who, he gets knocked off the horse. He wants to get right back on. But, you never really know how these concussive knockouts are really going to affect you. You have to take some time to let the brain heal. And I know his ego is telling him like, oh, it's fine. It was just a flash knockout or whatever the case. But you don't really know what's going on inside the skull there. So again, if I were someone close to him, I'm not letting him fight Ilia Topuria in January. Do I think there needs to be an interim title? Not really. I think putting Volkanovski maybe on UFC 100, 300 or something like that is a possibility, in which case we wouldn't need an interim title. If the UFC feels like they owe something to Ilia Topuria, I guess they could do that. But then are we going to end up seeing, Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski part 4? If Max wins the interim title, we're going to see that at UFC 300. I don't know what the appetite for that would be like. So what I would like to see is Volkanovski wait until February or March to fight and defend his title. I don't think there needs to be an interim title in the meantime, but I'm not the one writing the checks for the UFC either. So we have to give credit to Islam Makhachev because, he could have said no when they proposed Volkanovski as the substitute fighter, but Islam has the mentality that, he prepared to defend his title and he's going to defend it against whoever they put in there with him. So that's a mindset that you have to respect, whether you're a fan of his or not, or you're a fan of Volkanovski or a fan of Charles Oliveira or whatever the case. You have to admire a champion that's willing to do that. He said, I have to fight whoever they put in here. If it's the number one contender at 155, then that's who I'm going to fight. If it's a 170-pound fighter that moves down, that's who I have to fight. That's who they tell me to fight. So I really respect that. And, he's taken a tough fight on short notice too. He was preparing for Charles Oliveira, who's a completely different fighter. And yeah, he's taking Volkanovski, who's not in training camp or anything like that, but it was a tough, close fight with him the first time. So credit to Islam for taking the fight. And then obviously he looked good in there. He didn't look as flat as he did in the first fight. It could have been due to the rehydration time in Abu Dhabi as compared to Australia. It could have just been a better camp. Maybe he wasn't overtrained. Whatever the case, he looked like he was in much better shape, much better condition going into this fight. And it paid off. So he ends up getting a highlight reel knockout over a really tough guy in Volkanovski, who I don't believe has been finished, but I can double check that real quick. Okay. Okay, it looks like he has been. Okay, he was TKO'd also by a head kick in an early fight back in 2013. All right, so he hasn't been finished since he's been fighting UFC caliber opponents. So that, we're talking 10 years ago was the last time. So if you're only getting knocked out once every 10 years, that's pretty good. I want to talk about the post-fight stuff with Volkanovski, because even in the octagon and then again in the press conference, he was saying some concerning things. He was saying, I had to take this fight for myself because, I beat myself up in my own head when I'm not fighting, when I don't have a fight to prepare for. And he went on in the press conference to say, I don't know why it's like this, because I have a beautiful family. I have so much going for me, but things are just not good for me mentally when I'm not preparing for a fight. And that's really concerning because, here's a guy who obviously is an elite competitor, but he's 35 years old and he's a featherweight. The shelf life isn't going to be that much longer. If he's lucky, he'll fight until he's 40. But 35 years old, and every single fight he takes is a 5-round championship fight. So he's going to have to start thinking about his exit strategy at some point. Because if things are not good for him mentally when he's not preparing for a fight, there's going to come a day at most in the next 5 years where he's not going to have a fight to prepare for. And it's concerning to hear a guy say things like that. Maybe he's not thinking about what he wants to do after this. Everybody feels invincible when they're on top of the world, when they're the champion. But then, when the crowd's not there, when they don't have that competition to prepare for, if the things in your life are not fulfilling enough for you, that could put you in a really dark place. And I wouldn't want to see that for him. I wouldn't want to see that for anyone. And, people who do this sort of thing, whether they compete or they train or they coach, combat sports is definitely a form of therapy in its own way. So I can relate to it in that sense where, I have a similar situation where I have a beautiful family and my home life is fantastic. But if I get outside of my training routine, I can get a little grumpy. I wouldn't say depressed, but, start thinking about things that can be upsetting or things like that. So I can understand. And obviously I've never done this as a professional, and I've never done it to the level that Volkanovski has. So I don't know what it's like having that added high of all the people cheering for you and winning a championship and so on and so forth. I would imagine that after a feeling like that, after such a big high, it would be hard to match that in your day-to-day life, if not impossible. So I get what he's saying, but it's concerning. And I get he had just gotten knocked out, so he was in a very vulnerable place and felt like opening up in that moment. But I hope the people around him were taking notice and they try to help him think about what might be next after, after all the bright lights are gone and all the screaming fans are gone and the championship belts are gone and the preparation for the next battle is gone. I hope he is able to get himself into a place where, he can be satisfied with his life without those things. And I think it's good that he has identified that he has an issue with it, and hopefully he's able to sort it out. But to some degree, I get it. When you do this sort of thing, you're wired a little bit different than most people. And I'm reminded of that sometimes when I talk to parents and my daughter's friends, and I see the way that other people process things and think about life and think about confrontation and etc. And it's different. It's just different the way we process things and the way we handle human interaction. So I feel for him there, and I'll leave it at that. So let's move on to the co-main event. A lot of people thought I was crazy, siding with the champ Kamaru Usman, the former champ, I should say, but I'll always refer to him as the champ. I'm such a big fan of Kamaru Usman, but I thought that Usman would be too experienced, too slick for Chimaev to just run through and steamroll. And when he's not able to run people over, when he empties the tank, is when he's vulnerable. And I thought Kamaru Usman might have been able to capitalize on that. Now, given the performance, I don't think I was too far off. Obviously, Chimaev got him down and had his back for like 4.5 minutes of the first round. All three judges gave him a 10-8 there. Okay, but then he was kind of wiped coming out in the second. I thought Usman won the second round. I also thought Usman won the third round, but the third round was close. I thought Usman was landing the cleaner shots. I thought he was landing the bigger shots. That's what I saw anyway. And again, just to reiterate for those who didn't catch the beginning of the show, I started watching this fight in the third round. So I wasn't really aware of what had happened before that. I went back and watched it after the fact. So watching the third round, I thought, okay, it looked like Usman won that one. But I could see Chimaev winning the first two, having not seen them. So majority decision goes to Chimaev. And it turns out the judges' scorecards were pretty close. Well, one altered score, and we would see Usman as the winner there. So it went like pretty much how I anticipated. Usman weathered the storm, and then he was right in there with him. I didn't see him getting blown out of the water, especially with the inside information of training with Gilbert Burns, who's given Chimaev the hardest time we've seen anyone give him so far. So Usman had that inside information, and he knew what he was getting himself into. And, here's a guy who has been fighting at the championship level for years. So I don't understand what made people think that Chimaev was going to go in there and just obliterate him and not give him any kind of chance in this. It was a close fight. It was a good fight. And Chimaev came out the winner. And now they're talking about him against Sean Strickland. And from what I understand, Chimaev has trained with Strickland before and gotten the better of him in the gym. And, he knows he can outstrike him, outgrapple him. He's submitted him, whatever the case. But that's in the gym. And the gym is a different place than the arena. Not just physically, but it's just different. There are guys who are absolute killers in the gym. But once the lights are on them, that person doesn't exist anymore. And then on the other side, there are guys who consistently get their ass whipped in the gym. But when those lights come on and the pressure is there, they perform. We all know someone like this. If you've trained in a fight gym long enough, you've seen people like this. Or like, oh man, Johnny's fighting this weekend. It's going to be a disaster. Then Johnny gets in there and beats the fuck out of somebody. And you're like, who is that guy? That's not the guy we've been training with. what happened here? In any case, I believe that Sean Strickland is one of those guys who shows up when the lights are on and when the pressure's on. And, if he takes the fight with Chimaev and it goes into deep waters, it goes to those 5 rounds, I haven't seen any indication that Chimaev can make it through a 5-round fight. A big part of the dialogue with the Usman fight was that if it had gone 5 rounds, Usman would have won. I'm interested how you guys scored that fight. Obviously, Chimaev got the 10-8 in the first round. I scored 2-3 for Usman, which would have made it a draw. And, I wouldn't have been mad at a draw there. In any case, let me know what you think. How did you score Khamzat Chimaev versus Kamaru Usman? Let me know in the comments or on social media, et cetera, depending where you're listening or watching. All right. Magomed Ankalaev and Johnny Walker. This was just a bizarre one. So Ankalaev has Johnny Walker on the ground, knees him illegally. Referee separates them. Johnny Walker seemed to be coherent, but whatever questions he was asked, the referee didn't like the answers. So it was called a no contest. And some people seem to think that Johnny Walker was giving wrong answers on purpose so that he would get a disqualification win. I don't know if I necessarily buy into that theory. In any case, Ankalaev is a guy who there's just like a black cloud over this guy. Something weird always seems to happen when this guy fights. There was the fight with Ion Cutelaba where Cutelaba was like playing possum, so the referee stopped the fight. Then he had the draw in the championship fight with Jan Blachowicz. And it's a shame because this is a guy who is highly skilled. His talent is really elite. He is a guy who should be close to fighting for a championship, but man, just a string of unfortunate events has been the story of his career lately. Now, I mean, he should have known better than to knee him illegally. And now Johnny Walker is saying, he's making the case like, well, so what? You could just knee somebody in the head illegally and break the rule and you just get a no contest on your record? Why isn't it a disqualification? I mean, the referee kind of has to make the determination on the spot if that strike was intentional or not. And I guess he decided it wasn't. He decided it was an accident. And that's kind of at his discretion. So here we are. We're left with another bizarre fight from Magomed Ankalaev. And, this guy keeps getting set further back from a title shot. And it's not due to lack of skills. It's just due to, a series of unfortunate events. Ikram Aliskerov gets a first-round knockout over Warlley Alves. Flying knee. Finishes it up with some punches up against the cage. Just blasted right through Warlley Alves. Very impressive performance there from Ikram Aliskerov. So this guy, he's going to be a problem at middleweight. 30 years old. He's finished all of his fights in the UFC, including a knockout of Phil Hawes in the first round, and he won by submission on Dana White's Contender Series. He has a knockout loss to Khamzat Chimaev, and that's the only loss on his record. So, maybe he'll be looking to get that one back. I don't think he's close to it right now, but if I were him, I'd be calling out a ranked fighter right now because why not? maybe the winner of Brendan Allen and I forget who Brendan Allen is fighting next, but maybe call out the winner of that, or just be a backup fighter for Paulo Costa's next fight. That should be a good a good path to getting a decent fight. All right, so moving on down here, Said Nurmagomedov, first round submission over Muin Gafarov. They're calling it a guillotine choke. It was, I mean, some people call it a modified guillotine. Some people call it a ninja choke. It's basically a front headlock choke with a rear naked choke grip. So when you reach underneath the chin, get the forearm across the chin, grab your own bicep, and bring it across the back. Some people are particular about what this choke is called. I'm fine with it being called a guillotine. I'm not like one of these jiu-jitsu nerds, but I guess technically it was a ninja choke, and you could call it a modified guillotine as well. So it wasn't a traditional guillotine where your hands are locked. But in any case, impressive performance from Said Nurmagomedov. I don't know who's going to want to fight that guy, but let's take a look, shall we, at these bantamweight rankings. So, Said is currently ranked number 15. I don't know what you do here. Maybe like a Pedro Munoz. That'd be a good fight. Or do you move him all the way up and put him in there with like Song Yadong? I don't know. What do you do with Said Nurmagomedov? Let me know. Let me know what you guys think. Let's see. Muhammad Makhachev submits Tim Elliott in the third round. Tim Elliott's super durable fighter. He's a hard guy to put away, but Makhachev was the favorite in this one for a reason. And, Tim Elliott, he's been around a long time. How old is he? Let's see, 36 years old. For a flyweight, that's old. 36, you can start training at 36, and if you're a heavyweight and still make it into Bellator, potentially. But as a flyweight, that's a tough one. Super tough guy, super durable. Last person to finish him was Brandon Royval, and that was in 2020. So, yeah, man, maybe Makhachev is the real deal. Trevor Peek, unanimous decision over Muhammad Yahya. And then we had Javid Basharat and Victor Henry. So, this fight was nuts. So, Basharat lands low blows on Victor Henry multiple times, maybe twice in the first round. 15 seconds into the second round, Basharat comes out, throws a kick, and it catches underneath the cup of Victor Henry. And Victor Henry hit the ground immediately, was rolling around on the ground in pain. Basharat initially seemed like he didn't agree, thought it wasn't a low blow. He thought he hit the body. And then he seemed to sympathize with Victor Henry a little bit. And then it's ruled a no contest, which, again, this is at the referee's discretion. If the referee decides that Basharat kicked him intentionally with a low shot, he could have disqualified him here. He would have totally been in his rights to do so. Victor Henry's a tough dude. He's trained by Josh Barnett, and Josh Barnett does not choose, of course, the legendary Josh Barnett. Josh Barnett does not choose to work with just anybody. So this guy is tough if he's got Josh Barnett in his corner, because Josh has been very vocal about the fact that he doesn't want much to do with the UFC anymore. But he's willing to go out there and corner this guy, which I think says a lot. It's high praise from a legendary fighter. Now, based on Victor Henry's reaction here, I don't think he was exaggerating or making it up to try and get a disqualification win. I mean, that was a look of a dude whose privates were in a lot of pain. And from what Josh Barnett said after the fact, he kind of came at Basharat on social media because Basharat, again, he kind of called Victor Henry a coward and said he was faking it and it was a legal shot. And Josh Barnett fired back and said, like, do you want to see pictures of his swollen testicles? And do you want to see his, I don't know, MRI or whatever they had to take? So apparently he's suffered a lot of damage, which is really unfortunate. Luckily, I've never had to experience anything like this. I've been hit low. I've been hit really hard on the cup before, but I've never had anything like, the cup moved or they got underneath the cup or the cup broke. Just horror stories that you hear. I train with a guy at the gym who never wears a cup because he was rolling jujitsu one time and the cup broke. And he said it was the worst pain he's ever felt in his life. So he's like, I never wear a cup anymore. To each their own. You won't catch me like even holding pads for someone without wearing a cup. And knock on wood, I've never had an issue. But yeah, this looked incredibly painful. And oh man. I shudder just thinking about it. I don't blame Victor Henry for not continuing in this fight. Cedric Dumas, unanimous decision winner over Abu Azaitar, another middleweight fight. Then Mike Breeden knocks out Anshul Jubli in the third round. So Breeden clearly lost the first 2 rounds of this fight. And this is a 160-pound catch weight, so I'm not sure who wasn't able to make weight here. But if anybody does, let me know. So Breeden comes out in the third round and starts barking at Jubli like a dog and starts chanting, what was he saying, USA? Something along those lines. He's barking at him as he's walking him down and ends up getting the knockout 3 minutes into the third round. This was a huge comeback win from Mike Breeden because he handily lost those first 2 rounds. And I guess barking like a dog motivates him or something because it changed him in that third round. I think his coaches were honest with him. They told him he needed a finish and he got it. So good for him. Impressive performance. Muhammadjan Naimov, unanimous decision over Nathaniel Wood. Victoria Dudakova, unanimous decision over Jinyu Frey. Oh, Jinyu Fry, sorry. Another catch weight. This was a good competitive fight. And Jinyu Fry grappled early on, which was a good strategy. But then she kind of veered away from it, and Dudakova was able to run away with the decision. And then the first fight of the night, which was first fight of the afternoon, I should say, because those fights start at 10 a.m. here, I think. The guy we were talking about so much last week, Sharabutin Magomedov, who made his highly anticipated UFC debut against Bruno Silva. So on my regular episode last week, I was talking about, how scary this guy is and how I wouldn't want to be Bruno Silva and what an incredibly scary striker he is, et cetera, et cetera. But when it came down to making the picks and Matt asked me if he should pick Bruno Silva or Johnny Walker as his underdog, I said Bruno Silva for the fact that he's so experienced and Magomedov, as scary as he is, was making his UFC debut. So I would always side with experience. And, Bruno Silva showed it. And he landed some good shots on Magomedov in the first round and then realized he was not getting the better of him on the feet, so he took him down. Tried to beat him up there, but Magomedov still dangerous off his back, landing elbows, lots of strikes. It seemed like he was a little bit lost with his positional awareness on the ground. And, he was taken down by Bruno Silva, who is by no means considered a great wrestler. I mean, obviously he's a well-rounded mixed martial arts fighter, but he pretty much took Magomedov down at will. So if you're in the middleweight division and this guy should be on your radar if you're in the middleweight division because he just has star power written all over him. He's a fantastic striker, but man, if I'm a middleweight in the UFC right now, I'm dusting off the singlet. I'm breaking out the wrestling shoes. I'm getting to wrestling practice. And I wouldn't just be taking guys down in the gym and settling for that. You got to pass his guard. You got to control him, and you got to do some damage. And you got to make sure this guy is winded if and when he gets back to his feet, because otherwise he is a problem. And the guy's blind in one eye. So I imagine there's only, certain places where he can fight. Obviously, Abu Dhabi is one of them. I don't know where else. I mean, the guy will definitely never fight in New York. That's for sure, because they are so strict with the medicals. Maybe Vegas eventually, but I think he's only going to be able to fight overseas. So that's going to be a problem for him in terms of being able to stay active, since they're not doing that many fights over there, which is a shame because this guy is really fun to watch. He's really exciting. I hope they put him in there against another striker next. But yeah, I'm excited for this guy. And the one dead eye he has makes him look even scarier. He's like a ginger zombie werewolf that can strike. So interesting. I hope he gets with his coaches and starts working on some takedown defense. And once he has that, like, good luck. Good fucking luck with this guy. Let's see. I don't think there's anything else. I'm going to keep it short this week. We're at 42 minutes, so pretty decent. If you guys want to grab some MMA on the Rocks merchandise, you know what to do. All the links are in the show notes. Reaper1.co is the website. You can use the promo code MMA Rocks 10, save yourself 10% on an over-the-top, under-the-influence t-shirt, tank top, or hoodie. And full disclosure, any money I make on merchandise will likely be spent on alcohol. So I don't know if that affects your decision-making at all, but I'm just putting it out there. And that's all I got for this week. There's going to be no episode Thursday because there's no fights to pick, so we're not going to bother doing an episode. So you guys will have to wait until next week to see me take that shot of the Poblano liqueur. I am not looking forward to it, but I am a man of my word, and a bet is a bet. So that's what we're going to do. Until next time. Cheers, everybody. Goodbye.